advisor. My daughter likes to call me an influencer, which is kind of fun. That's a new word that he's introduced me to. And this is my friend Douglas here, and so he's
Douglas Poole out of Mansfield, Washington. I'm not Manson, which is on the Lakeland. I'm Mansfield up in the rocks and the dry areas. So that's put it in context where we're at.
well, welcome. Thank you. So to put this in context, we're going to kind of cover like Douglas's cropping scenario up in his area with his conditions, his rainfall. I'm actually pretty fortunate that he's willing to be here with me today to kind of help express some of the challenges up there. What's your rainfall up there?
6 to 9 inches a year. Not 69, 6 to 9. I put it in perspective because Randy mentioned his rainfall. So we were in the same drought, but when I'm cut 50%, I go down to 3. It's not that big a deal.
We know how to deal with drought better though. I'm from Northeast Wyoming originally. We know how to deal with drought better.
We're trying to get there.
Right?
I just always feel bad for Randy. He went from 22 to 11. I go from 6 to 3.
Yeah, we're on opposite sides.
Say it's really opposite on the street.
Yep.
You're on the street.
We're just trying to get you guys to pay attention.
This is actually, we should have put our phone numbers in case we're wandering around, found just send us back there.
So the big part of this is we're going to go kind of through a play-by-play of what we do. It's not going to be everything in full detail, but we want to kind of touch on enough stuff to give you just kind of a fresh take or just a different perspective on what we do. We'll start out with this. This is what we like to see. This is the approach that we try to take. We love to have rhizo sheets very, very dominant within the profile. That right there, I like to refer to it as a Bob Marley concert, sitting at the back row. That's how we know we're doing things right. And to get to this point here, you know, it just takes time. It takes photosynthesis, it takes taking synthetics out of there, it takes getting the seed trees away. Because as soon as you can get the soil to have a symbiotic relationship with the microbes, it starts to react like this immediately. This is, I'll let you go ahead and explain this.
So we had a field day. I had, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, I have 13 landlords. So we had a landlord day. And we were explaining to them why we were doing cover crops. And so obviously the picture you saw before was a cover crop. And you saw the exchanging going on between the microbes in the plant and everything else. And so that day we went out and I made my landlords start digging. And so we dug this up and we of course went across the street or the road to the neighbors. And we dug up their monoculture wheat crop. And we were able to lay that on the back of the, in this case, on the road. And all of those landlords had to stop and think, what are we looking here? And it gave us that opportunity to explain what we were trying to get at. Because what, in my case, what I'm asking them to do is in that low rainfall area, we're foregoing my cash crop. I grow wheat, canola, sunflowers, oats, barley, whatever else that we think we can make a buck off of. In my low rainfall area, I just had to forego the cash crop. And so I'm telling them that we are investing in my soil, in their soil. They asked me to paint their house, or if I rent their house, they asked me to paint their fences, to keep their barns up, everything else. But not once have they ever asked me to keep their soil up. And so I turned it around on them and said, you've asked me to invest in everything else. I'm asking for your permission to invest in your soil. So that's where he kind of comes along.
And that was a great day going out into the field. And of course, neither Doug nor I went out and cherry picked this, the actual landlord did. So he took one shovelful, and so that's what that's representing. He just threw the shovel wherever it landed, that's what he dug up. And so that's what he brought back, and so that's what we compared. This right here is a slide that I took from another presentation, but I think this plays very well into kind of some ideas that we need to really think about. This whole concept in a drought, especially in this last year, we had, you know, we always get the 90 days of 90, or this year is almost 90 days of 100, it seemed like, with no moisture. And so we start reading surface temperatures somewhere around that 120 to 135 degrees in our fallow systems. And to put that in context, up in Douglas County and Mansfield, it's a 2-year rotation. So it's crop, fallow, crop, fallow. So we always have a dead cycle. And so our idea is to basically have something living out there to kind of cool the area. So imagine taking, just his farm, for example, if you take in that region, if it's 20 or 30,000 acres, that now can cool that region 10 to 15 degrees in a soil tent. And now you're able to keep the biology alive longer. And you're able to kind of change that transevaporation and the respiration and everything else that's going on. And so you're able to, basically the whole region can hold more water. So, pretty fascinating. With that being said, it's like, where do we start, right? So, we're gonna kind of play through this a little quick and just kind of go through here. So this is how I start conversations when I'm at the farm gate. You need to know what your context is. What's your why? Your why should lead you to some goals, some ideas that you want to do, a direction. Once the goals are set, you need to make a plan. Right? We all got to get to that point of having the plan. The plan should include actions and timings, and then how to measure the results of the goals and ROIs. All of this, you still have to make money. Right? So this is an example of Douglas's approach. Some of his whys and goals that he's expressed to me over time. And it's more than just his, it's his family. Go ahead, Doug.
Everything that I've been taught, I was just having a conversation with somebody, that there's a sprayer out here. Unfortunately, I have 3 of them. We have enough acres. I have to have 3 of those. That's a $150,000 machine. I raise 40 bushel wheat. On 6 to 9 inches of rain, I have no yield anymore. It's just what I grow. So Industrial Ag has sold me that piece of equipment, has sold me, and I don't know if you know the relationship. Mike is actually supposed to be my agronomist, selling me fertilizers and chemicals and pesticides and insecticides.
Terrible, folks.
Somehow he became my soil health coach. And so I have the expense of him, I have the expense of that piece of equipment out there. I can't believe I wore this today.
He's not actually sponsored.
Because this is a $500,000 sweatshirt. This is all I was able to get out. Couldn't even get a hat out of this.
He'll make your fingers on the sweatshirt.
And so one day, when the light bulb finally came on in his mind, I said, I have to get away from this. 40 bushel wheat doesn't pay for this anymore. And we had been somewhere, and he says, I think the seed can do it. And so it tied together with all the soil health principles. Like as Tara mentioned, there's 4 or 5. Now they think there's 6. The context is added to that.
There's 6 soil health principles now.
In my case, in dryland, the context is I'm not making it anymore. I have to rely on the government, I have to rely on crop insurance to get by, and it's a broken system. And so I said to him, how do you fix it? He says, the seed.
So this is the list that we came up with, and I'll kind of play through this here real quick.
Everything you saw in the soil health principles.
So every one of these, if you read them out, it's all because of the microbiology and ROI. It all correlates back.
What's the ROI?
Return on your investment. And so that's key to making all of this function, right? Because if you're going to reduce things and you're going to change things, you need to be able to understand if it's costing you money or making you money. So,
Are we gonna be able to find that? Are we gonna be able to find that last slide somewhere?
So,
Can I take a picture?
you sure can. Yeah, absolutely.
and all the presentations will get posted on the Soil Health Stewards Google group, so.
Thank
Well,
you.
if you haven't signed up yet, there's a clipboard over here, so
Perfect.
put your email
Yeah.
down there.
Can you just help me for a second? Besides Randy, I already know how he farms. Does anybody else have to farm for the government?
Well, I didn't mean to impact anybody here, but that also includes my company, which is AES. So it's the same thing. But no, that was kind of a joke in there. Sorry.
I apologize. I only asked that just again to put it in context. In broad agricultural systems, in big ag, the government has to help you out, and you're very fortunate that you don't have to be beholden to that.
I just want to compliment you for helping out, so thanks.
Absolutely.
And you have a great job too.
I'm very fortunate right now. My employer allows me these comforts to reduce his ROI.
So, you know what our joke is I will know I have arrived when I put him out of business.
Exactly.
And I shouldn't tell you, my wife is actually my crop insurance agent, so I'm trying to put two people out of business. I don't know which one I'll probably get divorced from first.
You spend a lot of time on the couch, I don't like it. Anyways, can we do this with just a seed, folks? Is it possible? Is it possible? So I got a little crafty here. Did a little, computer art. Took some time here. Did a little science for you guys. This is what we want. That's standard, right? We want to take that number and double it, if not triple it. What does that do for us, right? So the above ground biomass, 20 to 30% of that can actually go towards stable humus. And 70-80% of the root exudates can go to stable humus. And then of the root biomass, 50%. The thing that's fun is when you double the photosynthesis, it doubles everything else. So that's how important that is. And if you were producing, let's say on a per acre by tons of carbon, if you're functioning at 80% root exudates as a carbon exchange, and say it's 200 pounds or whatever number you want to throw in there, you double that, that's 400 pounds.
What gets lost in that, I'm a fallow system. The theory behind my farming system is I have to take a year off to build up enough moisture to grow that crop. Can't pay for that sprayer out there. So I divide these in half when I present to my landlords. I'm at 7.5 to 10 photosynthesis.
Yep, so some of you guys,
We're backwards.
we're talking about the bricks, right? And how important the bricks is, and it's a measurement that we can measure photosynthesis. That is exactly true, because, and it's based on some variability, but the timings have to be correct every morning. And so we shut off about 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock would be our ultimate limit. And if it's a shady, cloudy day, we won't take that test. It has to be the same conditions each time. But we can see from foliar applications, we can almost double the bricks concentration. The highest I've ever hit is 24%. 24% bricks extraction on winter wheat. And it held there for 21 days. And so that's a massive amount of root exudates that we were able to add into the food system and the below ground ecology. Because you have to think, folks, that underground portion of that field, whether it's a monoculture or not, still has somewhere between 15 to 17 head of cows on it, underneath in weight, that has to be fed. How do we do that? Through basically this beautiful thing that's free, chlorophyll and photosynthesis and the whole process of root exudates. And it's all done for the microbes. So reducing fallow for the microbes. We want to keep this kind of position going here. So this is a field that I'll let you go.
So I'm fallow, so all year I spray, I use that to kill everything up until I seed in August and September. So we had decided that we were going to just let nature take its course, and this is God's cover crop, is what this is. And so we introduced the cattle in, I think they went out in May, and they kept this mowed down. And so this is a non-spray field in my fallow operation. That should be dry, I think, the day you took the picture. We were headed into 100-degree weather. Of course, then we got the 117, 118. And the cows had mowed that down. And so what we had decided was, in the Midwest, they talk about this relay seeding. They grow cover crops in the Midwest to dry things out so they can seed. Well, in my case, I don't have to dry anything out. But we had always been intrigued by this whole relay seeding into moisture. And so, as you can see, somehow, by the 10th of June, after we'd had the cows out on God's cover crop, there was still, look at all the moisture there. My fallow next to it that I had sprayed, moisture was already that far down, it had wicked that far. So we were like, well, geez, let's try this. And so we seeded the cover crop. I assume we got that picture in. I seeded the cover crop into this in the next week, and we relayed the moisture in our case. No chemicals at this point in time.
Yeah, so what we're going to try to explain here is why we don't think weeds are a problem. They're not weeds.
So you've got cover crop with weed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You didn't seed anything into that?
No, this is
Just weeds.
This was harvested last year. It was canola stubble. This is probably one of the worst pieces of ground I own. Landlord wants me to put it in grass, our farmer thinks it's junk, and so we thought, well, why not try it and work a piece of ground this out?
That right there is representing a biological sequence for soil correction from dynamic accumulators that are germed through the sequence of the biology.
Can you say that again?
Weeds are doing good things.
So the only time a weed becomes a pest or a dynamic accumulator becomes a pest is when it goes to seed production or it competes with the ROI of the cash crop. That, well, those are only bad in certain conditions if they're basically a monoculture.
Excuse me, so you're saying the cattle just ate the seed heads, or flowers?
We just didn't let it get to reproduction.
So we love the reason that we chose that kind of timing is the cows were wearing their lips out trying to get it. So it was time to move, right? And so we went and scratched it, and about a half inch to an inch down, moisture was there. And it was like, these poor guys have got sore lips, we gotta bring them into something that's worth eating. We went ahead and pulled a soil test on this, and I don't wanna focus too much time on this, but we show really high rates up there. We got low calcium, high phosphorus, we got lots of nitrate, nitrogen buildup, lots of iron, lots of aluminum, got weird pHs, CCs all over the place, got some problems going on in the base saturation. My belief is that we can use this soil test to basically prescribe our cover crops. And so this is what we did. So this here is what we would like to call a cattle salad. And it is very nutritious and very balanced, and not all of the species showed up for us in 3 inches of rainfall from September to September.
Randy, in your presentation, you talked about on your hilltops, you saw different species come up there than you did in the low places.
Yeah.
I did too, I saw that same thing. And what's the explanation? I don't know that I want to spend a lot of time, but I don't want to, I'm not a religious person, but somewhere along the line, God designed all of those things. That's why you see a certain weed grow up there and grow there. We're seeing the same thing with these mixes. That's why we're coming with such a diverse mix, to see if we can't do a shotgun approach.
Because we soil test that because we know that there's 3 known yield groups across that field. So why would we just put a cover crop to match one zone? And it's, someday if we ever got the technology, we could actually zone seed back the cover crops, right? That's gonna be awesome when we get there, that's coming. But right now what we understand is we went out there with roughly, we're shooting for about 10 plants per square foot, which is pretty dense. It works for us. It's not very, doesn't steal a lot of moisture. It functions, it shades, it cools the ground, it does what we need it to do. But that's where we started. So it's all part of the plan. Dynamic accumulators. If you haven't heard this word, you need to look it up. It's the accumulation of beneficial nutrients by plants. Hyperaccumulators. I think Tara was talking about going in there and mitigating some sort of toxic mineral from the soil. Plants can do that. So this is what I mean when I say all of this can be done by seed. Every single bit of it. The USDA has this studied, they have it documented, they have sites that we can go to, we can analyze it, look at it, and get some pretty good ideas. A lot of gardeners. So Bonnie Orr from the Wenatchee World, she's part of our herbicide resistance committee, and she tells me that she utilizes this when she makes compost. So I want to focus in, just for an example, on sunflowers. Just sunflowers alone. Just to kind of pull one out of there, just cherry pick it, just to kind of walk you through kind of what's going on. So when we add that in for cash crop rotation, or the microbes, it adds timings, diversity, pollinators, root exudates, warm season crop, which you normally doesn't get for cash crop, and it is a dynamic accumulator.
So the example is, in my case, I grow 40 bushel wheat. We had sunflowers. Following the sunflowers, first thing we found in the sunflower, we took a tissue test, all of a sudden I'm calcium deficient in a soil test. In the tissue test, all of a sudden all this calcium was in my sunflower. Then, okay, well, that's cool, whatever. The wheat following, I cut 85 bushel wheat following sunflowers. That was double the crop. All of a sudden all this calcium was in the wheat.
Yep.
And I said to him, I said, where did it come from? That was before he came across this new term.
So,
And so we knew we had drugged that up from somewhere.
yep, so we wanted to capture it, right? So we went out there and we plant sapped the sunflowers. I don't have the full presentation of the plant sap, they get a little complicated and whatever, but I did try to, I just wanted to kind of select a couple things out of there to kind of walk through the base saturation impacts of just a sunflower in season. So this is about the time, and this is up there, basically 3 inches of rain from September to September, technically on the field. Look at the calcium percentage. We never applied calcium to that plant. You're 25.3% calcium. It is the biggest ingredient in that tissue, or in that sap. Sulfur, 13, 20 on mag, got 11 on phos. Potassium's pretty high, right? It's got to have that strength to hold itself up. So it's got all of those things functioning. But if you look down the side here, nitrate is not that big of a player. Iron's not that big, copper's not that big. Yeah, boron.
Remember the soil test showed I was deficient in calcium.
Right, there's 44% by base, which puts it roughly about 600 pounds or something like that by the TEC of the soil. So this thing's pulling it from deeper, pulling it up. So this is where it gets fun. Has anybody listened to anything about what the Aussies are doing? My daughter said I had to use the term Aussies, not Australians.
I got a little.
Back to the same concept that we were showing you earlier. This is a representation of a land score and what it's accumulating when it's growing. And anything in yellow is what the USDA considers to be a dynamic accumulator. Anything in white doesn't qualify. It still accumulates it, it's just not a dynamic accumulator. Look at what bigwig can do. And then these plants can also be, this is where things get fun, and I wanted to touch on a little bit of fringe science here, that we can take a foliar cocktail of these elements and run it through a weed seeker or plant sensor or weed and reapply it back to the plant and it will kill them. Mold,
Say that again?
Yeah, say that again.
you can actually take, you can take a pigweed, for example, and you can juice it and then reapply it back to the plant as long as it's a dynamic accumulator, and it will wilt it and take it down. Now mullein, you cannot do that to. It's not a dynamic accumulator.
What he's talking about a little bit, we do have the technology now in my fallow. So when I am decided I've got to go out and kill something, we have the technology that uses infrared to sense the chlorophyll in the plant as you shoot the plant. And so I went from broadacre spraying Roundup or 2,4-D or whatever else. We've gotten that application rate probably, we've cut that anywhere from 75 to 95%. So in our case, we're no longer broad acring all of these chemicals across my soil biology.
My goal is to never spray chemical through his weed system and make him regret buying it.
We'll know we've arrived when I get to sell that piece of crap too.
Other than applying fertilizer. So are these really weeds or are they soil correction, right? They're being, in a biological sequence, they're being germed. Why are they the only ones that are showing up? The soil has lots of seeds laying there, and certain ones are being germed at certain times of year. And so as long as we are dealing with the biological sequence of what the soil is demanding with our cover crops, and we choose what's planted there, as long as we are correlating the dynamic accumulation that needs to be there, the weeds don't show up. I just wanted to do this one for fun. Is there any gardeners in here? Anybody? Anybody familiar with what a Cucumis sativus is? Come on, any guesses?
He likes to show off, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to throw that one in there. Okay, so using the dynamic accumulator concepts, weeds are not weeds. Hopefully you guys believe us by now. And they are germinated by soil biology to restore natural balance within the chemical, physical, and biological properties for soil health. Yes, ma'am.
your definition of dynamic accumulator doesn't include nitrogen fixers?
Is it two different things?
The plants can do that.
Right.
And so
Certain ones.
the thing that we find when we plant sap is nitrogen is not our problem. It's actually our reason for the antidotes. We over apply nitrate, which leads into a whole cascade of effects, and we could go into that for a couple hours.
We have to be careful when we present, and that's why I asked who's broadacre and who's not. We're talking about my context, and so, in the way I've been farming for 70, 80 years, our answer has always been to apply more nitrogen.
Yeah.
And that's,
So-
everything is pointing back to, every time I do that, I hose the system up.
So that's 152 units of nitrate nitrogen available, plus he's got his ammonium that's still available. And that's not even anything applied.
So I don't know if that applies to a garden or not, I couldn't tell you that it should.
A farmer is a gardener.
So that high of nitrate right there impacts our calcium availability, which then impacts our chloride availability, which then impacts our aluminum issues, and also our pathogens and diseases and insects. It will trigger it all.
So you're telling your cover crop mix to address some of these issues that you're seeing in your soil.
Yes, sir. Yep, so if you got high nitrate problems in your soil, put legumes in there. Legumes are the laziest thing you put in the ground. Because they will not work for anything until all the free stuff's gone. In the process of doing that, they will manipulate your hydrogen and they will manipulate your triphosphate calcium. So reducing chemicals. This is going to be a little funky slide. It's all done for the microbes. Trust me, we like them. This is a busy one. So this is an Excel spreadsheet that I developed that kind of helps model how much savings you can do by utilizing a spray sensing technology. And so just on 312 acres, on the high side, it's roughly $7,600 per season. You put that in perspective across this farm, it equals $210,633. Right?
What's the percentage?
I'm sorry.
What's the percentage then?
What's that?
75.
I'm probably, I don't go to my coffee hour anymore in my small town. I wear a tin hat according to everybody else. That number's nice, that's saving the farm, to be quite honest. I've become a huge believer that the Roundup and the 2,4-Ds that I put in on my soil microbiology may not be killing it, but at very least they're having to stop them in metabolism. And when I only get 6 inches of rain a year, and if I've hampered one microbe with any Roundup or 2,4-D, I liken it to maybe spending a little too much time the night before or too many glasses of wine. You're noon before you get up and get going. Why would I continue to do that in my biology? So while that technology is expensive, there's a cost, or there's a benefit, a return on investment that I don't know that I can quantify, other than my tin hat says that I'm doing the right thing.
So because of that spreadsheet, the impact that we had, and I want to go through some of these next numbers here because it shows a very physical impact on our environment, on a region aspect. But I have 13 of these machines running out across my area now. And so just on that 312 acres, this is kind of just a rough ballpark of what we would have done business as status quo, right? Versus what the weed it will save us is 107 gallons per season. You put that into basically his broadcast acres of 8,600, he saves 2,953 gallons. Let's put that into some dollars. So RT3 at $50 a gallon is what the threat is right now. That's $147,000 in Roundup. And then you gotta have your tank mix partners to go with it. So that's $210,000, right? Let's put that across 13 machines. And then we are reducing this all for the microbes because every single thing that's in this is impacting that environment. And it's impacting our nutrients, it's impacting our base saturations.
Those of you who don't know, right now, I'm not guaranteed my Roundup for the year. There's a shortage of Roundup, and so that $50 cracks me up. I'm fearful that I'm gonna pay 70 if I want to get a hold of it pretty soon.
So we're not done. right?
There's more.
There's more, folks, because
Man, you did this equal.
we cut that thing by 75%, right, inputs. Well, we can go another 50 on top of that by using one of these. Yep. Introduce your farm to reverse osmosis, whether it be through your fertilizer, through your liquid that you're using for your starter, through your foliar feeds, through any sort of chemical impact. All of that needs to be ran through one of these, and it will help things work way more efficiently. So back to the cover crop where we started, and so this is 35 days into the drought. You can see in the background there's fires going on, and the smoke's rolling around, and things are happening still. Things are starting to roll out pretty good. That was that field that was pretty much furred up, weeds, right? Now it's transitioned. It exchanged all of its energy over to this as the relay. That's my dog. He's a stunt dog. He's exactly 1 foot by 2 foot for scale. He's a redneck dachshund. I am trying to get him licensed. He's got a 6-inch lift kit. This is 40 days after Voz and I are out walking the field. We're looking for weed pressure, that sort of thing. We like to document this. 312 acres. We walked it pretty long and pretty hard that day, and I only found maybe 1 to 2% that had anything there. So the fallow system's functioning, right? We've only done one little application. Go ahead, sir.
Was that around it?
Yes, we did. We did a light dose just because it was a blanket, and we're in a reducing state, not a complete, like, full turkey state yet.
So how was it seeded? Like, yeah, what was the process when you had weeds and you're transitioning to seeding the cover crops? What did that
So
look
we
like?
would have, I seed with a hoe drill. I don't have a disc drill yet, so I seed with a hoe drill, which is way more disturbance than I like, but that's where we're at. On 12-inch spacing. So that's what,
It's paired
you know,
wrong.
I'm sure Randy's looking at it going, my God, he's excited about that. Yeah, in my area, it's too bad we didn't have a shot of the spring wheat that I had next to it. Spring wheat had gotten about that big, and was about that big,
Yeah.
and was yellow. And so here's this
Because of
diverse
the
7-8-way mix.
The aluminum toxicity.
But yeah,
is
this is, on top of everything else, is solid aluminum. Field has gotten, so the pH is that low.
So this is 61 days in, August 18th, and this thing is now shading and cooling. It's starting to do a very good job, and we're starting to analyze now where we're going to place our cash crops and our timings for cash crops. And so the stand is healthy and photosynthesizing very, very well at a high efficiency. It's all about choices, right, guys? We like choices for carbon cycling. And so on the 18th, we were looking at a field that had where fire burned all the residue off.
Was that deliberate, is that fire? I mean,
No.
you didn't run over it with a burner, did you?
No, that's just how hot the fire, it turned it to a moonscape.
We burnt in 20. And so of course I fallow, stupidly enough. And so this laid that way from all through the end of September, or all through 2020. And had to go through 2021, which of course, 118 degree. I don't know that we ever took the temperature. Had to have been 140,
That was
150.
135.
You could drive by this field with your windows down in the pickup and it would get hotter, and which is a majority of my farm.
My dog, I had to carry him.
Couldn't touch it.
I had to carry him because it was too hot on his feet, and I felt so terrible. I just marched out there like I normally do, and he just running along, and then pretty soon he's just sitting there trying to lift his paws up, and I didn't even realize it because I wasn't ready to measure the soil temp.
This was here, the temperature that one day we took was what, 90? Underneath the canopy.
Yeah, that was really good. That's the biggest separation that we've measured.
What was the daytime temperature when you took the soil temperature?
So that afternoon, I think we pegged out at just under 100 degrees. It was like 97 or 96, something like that day. So we were trying to get the cows in there a little sooner. We wanted to graze that a little sooner, and then there was, with the cowboys and some other things, we just didn't get them in there like we wanted to. Roughly put in about 425 steers, some almond cows, keep them in line. We didn't want them sniffing the wire too hard and getting out. So the moms keep them in line, keep them balanced, keep them trained. This is what it looked like, and again, there's some gross mismanagement on our part, my part, his part, however you want to look at it. This was supposed to be dormant seeded this fall, and we didn't get that done. And then to give you just a little backstory, there's 1,000 acres of that system planted. And so the 312 acres that we started in was going to be a succession of moving the cattle to keep them off of a bale-fed system over the winter. And so that's what it looked like above the snow line. And so the only thing that we did, and this is where we messed up, is we didn't plant it because the county doesn't plow up there. And so it dumped a lot of snow right away, and the cattleman pretty much got a little nervous about it, and he pulled the cows back down because we didn't know what we were looking at. And so he pulled them down and started bale feeding them. And so we left 600 plus acres like this sitting out there. So we went back out there, Douglas kind of plowed his way in and got a good look at it. And so this is on the 21st of January. It's still up above. That snow ranges, there's probably some drifts out there somewhere around 2 to 3 feet deep, something like that.
So how many acre limbs do you think you could run on that with that much snow on there?
That's what we're trying to determine that.
Trying to
That's why I
figure it out.
plowed in there to see, and what you're seeing there in this case is mainly sunflowers left. Why I wanted to go up there was when it snowed, the sorghum was installed. We just couldn't get the cows there. Of course, the snow knocked the sorghum down. But my belief is if the cattle had been there during the snow, they would have known it was there, and they would have plowed through and found it. So again, we're in this system trying to learn the timing just of the cattle and the range.
Yep. So let's just run a couple numbers on this real quick, and these are some ballpark, there's some variability to it, there's some things that are happening there, right? So there's 425 calves that were in there for 29 days on 312 acres, average being was $1.50 per day, gets you 637.50 or 18,487. That gets you 59 bucks an acre, right? And then you got your starter that we ran a little bit of humic, fulvic acid, and some molasses underneath there to kind of spur on the biology, get it excited, give it a place to kind of propagate and bloom. And so that with the seed cost nets them out at $22.72. You minus off the chemical savings, because now remember, green fallow, we're not spraying that. No chemical application. And with the weeded system being a spot sprayer, it only sprays the plants. And so we still are able to save $15.50 an acre. So that gives you $38.22. Now let's dive into this fertilizer. I know there's lots of people in here wondering about this part. Again, for the microbes, you want to wean off nitrogen fertilizer. It's important. We see things with disease, everything else that's going on. This is our plan. Year 1, reduced by 20%. Year 2, reduced by another 30%. Year 3, reduced by another 50%. This is your example. Give you a ballpark idea. And then when you hit the bottom, you have a maintenance of whatever your bottom number is. And then you're going to want to test it, test it, test it. Follow up on that. Make sure you're measuring. Look at the dynamics, what's happening. Is it going to be more rain that year? You can always do a foliar application. So look at your foliar stuff. Pretty easy to do a foliar application. A pound of nitrogen foliar equals 10 to 15 pounds soil. You can move the needle pretty fast. Catch up if you think you're behind. Look at how much calcium, the manganese, the boron. All of these elements are way more efficient, way quicker absorbed, and way better utilization if it's foliar.
You know, Terry, you mentioned you worked on biosolids. So I have, whether it's good fortune or fortunate enough to have the longest running biosolids test plots in the nation analyzed by WSU at my ranch. And so forget about the biosolids for a second and all the benefits that brings. I've focused in on the control that has been in since 1994. Do you know in my area, the control compared to the commercial fertilizer that he's been selling me for all these years has never paid for itself once since 1994. And what did my dad do and what did I continue to do up until a couple years ago? I kept writing the check and sending the biology back. And the data was right in front of me all of that time. I'm embarrassed.
Can you say that again?
Since
What was the number? You've got a control where you're doing nothing?
has had no commercial fertilizer since 1994.
Okay.
compared to the commercial that I would have just normally put on based either on a soil test or just what Dad always did.
Status quo.
Status quo. And that, the commercial has never paid for it.
Good, Randy?
Could you address on the soil testing, test that, shows what's plant, what's there, but then also quantifies what's actually plant available?
Yeah, so there's some really good tests out there today. We didn't have technology like that back when I started, but we have it today. Some people will call it or define it as water extraction, and some people will define it as paste extraction. And so the labs now will run what is called a plant available or water extraction or paste extraction. So you may have certain elements that they're high in the soil inventory, but they're bound. You can have tricalcium phosphates, which show high phosphate, low calcium. You separate that stuff out of there, and the way that they extract it, you can actually see how much is actually plant potential availability. And so once you do that soil inventory, it really plays into the story of the test type process. Once you know what your soil inventory is capable of in a releasing mechanism or a plant available type form, then you can kind of dial in what you think you need foliar to top. And so it's a process.
No, there's different tests, like you said, there's different soil tests out there. I mean, there's a painting test, there's some other tests. Do you have a specific recommendation with what kind of test you would do?
The two labs that I've worked with so far, one is called Logan Labs and the other one is called Denali. Yep. And those two labs do a pretty decent job on the water extraction or the paste extraction methods. Yep.
All of those, when somebody mentioned the SAP earlier, I like going down that road because the SAP forces me to do, basically every couple of weeks, we're gonna take a look at that.
You do a step analysis, you pull a step.
That's where we're at, yeah. He started that for me last year. My concern in it, you can tell I'm very jaded, and I'll put my tin hat on for a second. I've learned, and I get shot. Are you the only agronomist in the room?
I don't know, am I?
Any other agronomists selling fertilizer? All right.
I'm a turn
All that soil test is that I've got stacks of them this high, soil test, because I have zones, I have variable rate like Randy does. I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of soil tests. It's a fertilizer brochure, sales brochure, that's all it is. I don't know how many times I've been to some of these soil health things and they said, get rid of it. It's not telling you anything, because it's one snapshot at that one time in the day that I usually we're able to take, a month ahead of when I see.
Yeah.
There's so many variabilities, and that's all that thing has become. And so I have to, because I'm in some governmental programs, I gotta take these soil tests, but they're useless to me. They tell us nothing because we can take them 2 weeks later, and all of a sudden I got 50 pounds more nitrogen, or I got 75 pounds less.
As the soil warms up and the biology starts to function.
If there's biology, again, remember I'm fallow, there is no biology going on.
And they won't use credit for that.
Yeah.
And then,
Another question, I noticed you did the foliar, that was probably why you stuck that, you do foliars, that's probably why it's critical to do the reverse osmosis, to have those foliars more effective, because they're not being bound by whatever whatever chemicals are in your water.
well, yes, sir, because you want those things to be readily available and to be very efficient. Some of these things cost a lot of money when you get out into these types of ranges, so you want to be very efficient with it and make sure that that's going to happen. So it's not the end of the world if you can't get the reverse osmosis system to help with the foliar nutrient program, but it's definitely going to be in your benefit. Absolutely. Because it could reduce these pounds by half.
Get tied up with your chemicals.
Because there is no tie.
Because there's chemicals in your water that can tie these
Yep,
nutrients.
your
in.
carbonates, bicarbonates, and all of your minerals.
All those reactions
absolutely.
that
Yep,
tie up.
yep, you might as well stick bubble gum underneath the table.
In my broadacre system, I'm fascinated, and that's why we went to the foliar system, is I need to let the plant decide how it's going to interact with the soil biology. I don't need to let it decide. It already knows, I need to get out of its way. And so, to make myself sleep at night, we still do foliar. I really believe at some point in time, I don't have to believe it, we will get there where I'll just let the soil biology handle it, whether that's a cover crop or whatever else. I won't even have to do this anymore. But we've come to here because I need to get out of the way of the soil biology. That's the whole idea, for me anyway, for foliar.
Our foliar program right now is based on his variable maps that we still have to do by his government contracts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate the rates of chlorophyll production that we're going to apply back to the plant to increase the sugar production. which then will increase the photosynthesis, which will then drive the soil biology based on biomass of those zones.
You ever
Things
done-
get fun.
You have done bricks, use bricks at all? I'm
Yep.
curious. You do that?
Yep, absolutely. We can monitor that and see that, and we pushed it up to 24% and held it there for 21 days.
Yeah, I did see that.
But you can go back an hour later or be an hour earlier, and that's what's.
Don't write noon.
But it's fun to see, that, because you go to the neighbor's monoculture wheat crop, and it's 3.
Right, if you compare, compare apples, I mean, we do, like I mentioned earlier, if you sample, you try something, then you get some changes, it's interesting to see. So, you did something that increased the photosynthesis, and then actually you compare yours to your neighbor, at the same time, there's something going on there.
The goal
Well, they
is
head
to
out.
be here, we're here, but
Yeah.
my monoculture, and I'm still monoculture with a lot of it, because we're not fully transitioned, but I'm not, at least I'm here, we're working with that.
Down here where.
So just running a little scenario here for the 2 enhanced microbes. So urea today is, last I checked, is $1.15 a pound of N. So in Douglas County, 50 pounds of N is a pretty common number, plus or minus. And so that's going to net out at 57, 52, let's say, per acre. So if you use this model of reduction, first year, you're going to save $11.52 in this scenario. By year 2, it's $13.80. By year 3, you're going to be $16.10. But overall, you're going to be $41.42. And this maintenance number of 14 pounds needed, that's very achievable in that system fully. We can drive in that mechanism all day long, folks. All day long. We don't need to be going and ripping the soil up, trying to put nitrate down there. So you put that across 8,600 acres, and that becomes a pretty serious number. I like this one. Anybody in here like worms? Have you ever done the math? I stole this slide, so I admitted it. But I was out at Acres, and they had this out in the hallway. And the author allowed me to take the photo, and I told him I tried to make him famous. But this is fascinating.
I'm embarrassed.
Think about.
There are farms, anybody know of Diane and Ian Haggerty? Yeah. 75,000 acres, and they put an application of vermiculture or vermicast on, and some compost extract, and that's it. And then they graze the sheep. That's their weed control and their fertility. And I'm very embarrassed that we're not there yet. We're trying to get to that point, but that's see how close we are. We really are. We're eliminating the synthetic.
Anybody in here see worms? You do?
I teach and I put into practice no dig gardening.
Fantastic.
And, I have so many worms that I have no weeds. I will dig up the occasional quackgrass or crabgrass here and there, but there's no annual weeds whatsoever. And in the spring, there's so many worms that the ground moves and it can hear it crinkling. It is crazy. So.
Makes you uncomfortable walking out
Yeah,
there.
the worms they're amazing, and I was explaining this to some folks earlier, that, I have 2 different species of worms in my garden. I have the long earthworms and the red wigglers. And because I did no-till digging, the worms are going out of tilling because the long ones, the long earthworms, they go up and down when they're drilling. They can go down 6 feet.
Oh,
and
yeah.
back up. And then the red
Those tunnels
wigglers,
are amazing.
they're so cool. The red ones will go back and forth. And so between the big ones going up and down, the little ones go back and forth, I don't have to till. I haven't used the road tiller in 10 years.
It's amazing.
I get 2.5 pound onions. Just massive, massive.
It's
Can I
incredible.
ask you a question?
Yes.
I need your card because you're hired.
Okay.
He just wants the onions.
You're fired.
I've been trying to work myself out of a job all day.
You guys have about 5 more minutes.
What's that?
5 more minutes.
Oh boy, okay, so we gotta go. So green marketing, we're gonna try to fly through this because there's all kinds of things. I wasted every single gift card I had for Christmas to try to decipher this between 2 grand companies, which is tragic. I'll never get that money back. But this is what it comes down to. I wanted to slide through this real quick, but it's a serious number. So if you're a grain marketer or you're harvesting grain, pay attention to the premiums and discounts of protein, because there's a big difference per acre. of where you go, how you function. And skip over that. So this comes into the tail of the tape at the end, right? Let's add some of this stuff up. We get 2452 for the chemical and foul reduction. This number right here is a new program from SGI through the NRCS equipped. And so it's 7580 per acre to do cover crops. The integrating of the cattle is right there. So that wasn't on every acre. But if we just look at what we can control on every acre, it's $119 an acre per year. Which if you put that across 8,600 acres, it ends up being a pretty substantial money that you can take his wife on a trip.
30-second story behind the grain marketing. We put protein monitors on our combines. It measures the protein of the wheat and or the oil content of the canola every 7 seconds. And so at each load, I can determine what the protein is. The elevators were deducting for protein this year because it was a drought. The wheat was high protein. Back to his number, if I had paid attention and utilized that technology the way I should have, I lost $27,000 in a 500-acre field because I didn't basically pay attention to the data and then take it to the correct elevator. That's what
This is very, very busy, but both companies by design will net you the exact same money because they know each other's programs. And so they're kind of like challenging you to like show me that you know better.
So we use the technology this year. I will know each semi-load and I'll determine who wants it, who's gonna get it. That's the point he's trying to make.
Yeah. So anyways, is there any questions or anything like that? Sorry we kind of flew through some stuff there, but I just want to kind of touch base on a lot of different topics. We didn't get to dive very deep, but.
So on the cover crops on your different sizes of seeds there, where did you set your drill at?
Whatever the middle seed was.
Oh,
Seems to work. Yeah, I've never had any trouble with bridging, with it sorting out, sifting out. We seem to get a nice mix. And that's just with an air card.
Okay. With the fava beans too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they seem to meter fine. Like, we were right on every time.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I used to grow orchids, and we used an RO system, and I discovered there was a lot of wastewater with using an RO system. Is that negated because of the healthy soil that you're creating, so that you're saving water, or are you finding that, is there a loss of water that you're having because of using the RO system?
So just a little deeper dive into that, the way that the county and the EPA was having us maintain the water waste from these systems is they were having us put it back down the well or put it into a holding pond. And so the water's not being like completely thrown away or wasted. It's going to be recycled. Yeah. It needs to settle out somewhere because now it's concentrated. Yes, sir.
Have you tried any buckwheat or anything like that?
We want to in the worst way. So in 2016, we were the first ones to try a cover. I tried 13, but in 16 we had some buckwheat in the mix. And the grain company showed up to a soil health little meeting we were having. Threw open the door, didn't introduce themselves, and said, "I heard there's buckwheat in your cover crop. If I find out that it was in your field and it ends up in our grain elevator, I will shut you down. You'll never sell wheat in this county again." Apparently, the Asian markets are allergic to buckwheat.
Very threatened by it.
Very threatened by it. So pardon me?
Any flax?
We put a little flax in, but that doesn't seem to raise any red flags.
One of the exciting things that we got is he's got a new field that he's going to be taking over that's pretty much 100% serial rye volunteer. And so we're just going to let that thing ride, and we're going to go in there and we can either swath it before anthesis and feed it to the cattle, or we can roll it down. We can just basically just push it to the ground and basically seed into it and relay it through. And use it as protection, but we don't have to buy that seed.
My bellwether to determine if I'm doing something right, this is when I find out the coffee shop is mixed off about rye, vetch, anything else that we have in the mix, because we've spent 60 years trying to kill it, either with tillage or now with chemicals. And so it must be, it goes back to his dynamic accumulators and all of those. The weeds are already telling us what needs to go on, how God wants to heal that soil. We're just trying to mimic it with cover crops.
Why fight it?
That is my warning. I love it when it gets back to me with the coffee shop's dispatch.
Gotta be good. It's like a scorecard.
Somebody's